are Locked On Rays, your daily Tampa Bay Rays podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Rays podcast with myself, Kevin Weiss, alongside Ulises Sambrano. And today and Friday, we have the pleasure of being joined by Aram Leighton, the creator proprietor of JustBaseball.com. Aram, thank you for joining us. We always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's one of my favorite places to come and just talk baseball. And it's always fun when we put out a Rays top prospect list because the system's always great and you guys always have great questions. So it's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, we should dive right into that. You pinned an article, Tampa Bay Rays top 15 prospects for 2024. I think we know who it's headlined by, but yeah, there we go. If you're watching on YouTube, Junior Caminero, among others as well. But Aram, if you can just kind of give an overview of this list and I guess how fun it was for you to compile some of these names.
I mean, it's always a blast for me to dive into the Rays system. I can tell you that much. But, you know, I think it's interesting this time around where, you know, the Rays are always able to develop and maximize pitching and identify. But I'd argue that since I've been doing this is definitely the most hitter heavy, position player heavy system that, you know, or that the Rays have had that I've covered. And it doesn't mean that they don't have some arms of intrigue, but you look through the top 7 prospects, you know, we graduated Shane Baz, but just because I think he's thrown more innings than our threshold, 30 innings. We graduate you. Baz has eclipsed that. And also just like, he's been a prospect for like 20 years now. But I feel like this is one of the more unique situations where you look at the top 10 and every single player is a position player. So that is unique, but the Rays, you know, they go out, they trade for Pepiot, who's, if he was a prospect, would also be, you know, within the top 5 there. And some of the other arms that they've been able to add to the fold that, you know, I think are extremely talented. They're confident in their ability to go sign guys that are underrated, like an Eflin, and go trade for like a Rasmussen before the injury. So it's interesting to see them just really lean into the position player side of things, though. And there's no shortage of talent there, though.
Now, is that, you think, because they have cracked something with the hitting, or is it because now they feel so good with their pitching prowess factory mojo that they're like, you know what, we can get a Pepiot, we can get those sort of guys. Now we can transition to getting a little bit more bats?
I think a little bit of both. I think when you look at the way they like to draft and their draft models, you know, I won't pretend to know what their model is. Otherwise, I think a lot of other teams would probably be following suit, even though, you know, they haven't been perfect, but they seem to do a good job, whether it's identifying, you know, through trades or drafting. But I think they often feel like, you know, the best player available is a bat. And there's a lot of volatility that comes with arms. We see that. I mean, look at like a Shane Baz that you go out and get. Looked like a slam dunk, and we're still waiting, you know, for him to really be able to finally play. We saw what happened with Brennan McKay. And, you know, when you feel really good about the bats that are available, I look at a Braden Taylor this past draft, like he kind of just fell right into their lap. Then Colton Ledbetter was another guy that, you know, I felt like was a borderline first round talent. They get him at 55th overall. Like, I feel like a lot of times, probably based on their big board and their models, there's bats that are just falling into their lap, and they'd rather take that value than, you know, reach just for the sake of getting an arm.
In big picture here, Aram, where would you, and I don't know if you've run through all the other prospects and other organizations, but if you can just kind of ballpark where the Rays system is right now in terms of ranking in relation to the other 29 teams. Are they 3rd in all of baseball, 5th, 7th, 10th? Where would you kind of pin them at as of today?
It's a great question because, you know, once we finish the top 15 prospects for all 30 teams, I could we're going to put out rankings that have the, you know, the system rankings, you know, in order, and pretty much just do it based on accumulation of all the prospect grades we put out so that it's not as arbitrary. But just for the sake of the conversation, because I think it's fun, I think it's probably in the 8 to 10 range. I think there's a couple X factors that could really put them over the top, you know, this coming season. But you look at just to spoil, our top 100 list is going to come out in the first week of March. 4 top 100 guys, that's always going to put you in the top half of the league for the most part. There's, you look at like a Dom Keegan, we talked about Braden Taylor, Ledbetter, like those guys, if they take a step forward or play the way that we think, I think they can this coming year, even in Adrian Santana, could see them really make that leap. But you have the best prospects, a top 2 or 3 prospect in baseball in Junior Caminero. That's also really going to bolster the system a little bit more too. So I'd say it's probably in the 8, 7 to 10 range, I'll say, to be safe.
And now you've dropped the name that everybody is probably logging on to hear you talk about, Junior Caminero. What can you expect from a Junior Caminero with his talent? We saw a little bit of it last season, but what can you expect, you yourself as a fan, as a baseball fan, from Junior Caminero?
I think show-stopping power, and bat speed that you're just gonna laugh sometimes when he connects, and I think we saw a little bit of that, like you mentioned, in his debut. But when you look at the exit velocities and you put him up against the entire major leagues, he's up there with just about anybody. Like what we like to look at a lot is 90th percentile exit velocity, right? Because it takes, instead of just one-off maxes, how often are you getting to the top 10% of your exit velocities? It's just easier to just grab the top 10%. 111 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity puts him up there, I think, in like the top handful of hitters in Major League Baseball. But it's not like he's some massive swing and miss guy either. He's not going to be competing for batting titles, but he makes a fair amount of contact. You wouldn't think so with all the moving parts to his swing, but he makes plenty of contact. And the approach continues to get better. But it just seems like he's one of those guys that even when he mishits a ball, it's going to get out. Even when he's fooled, he can hit it out. And that's why I think he easily is going to have seasons where he can hit 30 plus. I think there's a chance he could hit 40 if he's able to elevate more consistently. But I think you're looking at a guy that has as much offensive upside as any prospect.
Follow up to that, is there any chance that he will or can play shortstop at the big league level, or we shouldn't even be having that conversation anymore? He's a third base corner outfielder. He's not a shortstop.
I think you could put him there and it wouldn't be a totally unmitigated disaster. And I think he's come a long way in terms of his mobility and his defense. And I think I think that's a focus for him. But I just knowing how much the Rays value defense, especially at shortstop, I think you're stretching him a bit thin there. It's a guy that you want him focusing on just hitting bombs and playing big league shortstop's a different beast. I think he can develop now into, there's questions whether he'd be able to play third long-term. And I think he's answered that. And I think he can play a solid third base, but outside of plugging in here and there, emergency start here and there to plug in at short. Yeah, he can do that. But I think if he's playing there day in and day out, not only is it going to start to pile up in terms of, balls sneaking through that the range just isn't there for, the actions maybe aren't as smooth as you'd expect from a guy that you want to play shortstop. I also think you're taken away from his ability to just focus on doing what he does best, which is just mash baseballs.
We've had this conversation before, Kevin, but I don't remember where you landed on. I said no. Do you think, Kevin, that he's going to start on the opening day roster?
I don't believe so. And that's kind of where I know where you're getting at with Aram. I think that I don't think he's played a rep in AAA. So I wonder if they're going to give him some more seasoning. I guess, I mean, I won't take the question from you, Ulises, but I think we're on the same wavelength.
We're on the same wavelength. That's what happens when you've been talking baseball together for more than a decade. So you know it, Aram. Do you think he's going to see some AAA action before finally getting that call up? And if so, which probably will be happening, how much time do you think he'll see down there?
It's a great question. And I loved his answer. I think he touched on it briefly where he's like, hey, if I go to Durham, I'm not going to be there long. And I love that confidence. And I think he's right. I think it's like a Jordan Walker type of situation, Anthony Volpe type of situation where I think if the opening day was tomorrow, probably going to AAA, but those two guys were so impressive in spring training that it really forced their hand, the big league teams, the Yankees and the Cardinals. I think if Caminero has just this ridiculous spring, it'll be impossible to justify not having him there. And I generally don't think you can put too much stock into the spring. But when it's situations like this and Caminero's hitting the ball like we know he can, and playing a decent, defensive third base if they have him getting reps there or wherever it may be. And then you look at the DH spot, and right now, I mean, that's a spot where you might plug in Aranda, you might plug in Harold Ramirez, and I like those guys, but neither of them have the potential to hit 35 home runs, right? Like, and if Caminero is showing you that he might be able to do that, I think you got to do it. So I would say right now, safe answer is he goes to AAA. But I think if he performs in spring training, he has a chance to earn a spot. If he just has a normal spring training, I'd imagine he's in AAA for a month. I think he's going to be so comfortable there. I honestly believe for a lot of hitters, the Southern League was more difficult, especially dealing with attack ball through stretches. The zone's tighter. He's been working on being a little bit more disciplined there. It's only going to work in his favor. The ball tends to take off a little bit more in AAA. I think he would really force their hand in a month of AAA too.
Game Time is the place where you can get the tickets that you want. If it's basketball, football, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, you can find exclusive flash deals on Game Time. In fact, you can also see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. With spring training coming up, why not use Game Time? Perhaps you see Aram. Perhaps you see him taking notes on some race prospects. So today, take the guesswork out of buying tickets using Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This will be my last on Junior. I don't know if you have another one, Kevin, but
I do have one more if you don't swipe it from me. Yes.
Then you ask Kirsten.
Okay. Aram, I guess you being pretty bullish on Junior not spending too much time in AAA. Follow up on that. Where are you leaning? What are the odds or the likelihood of him being the 2024 AL Rookie of the Year? How much competition does he have for that, or can he pencil himself into that conversation?
You did steal it from me. You did steal it, yeah.
Sorry. You take the next question.
Yeah. I love that you asked that. So I was looking at the Rookie of the Year odds, and I was shocked at Caminero. I think it was how long they were. I think it was like 16-1 odds, right? So I was shocked. And that was one of the bets I've already placed going into the season. I was like, I got to sprinkle on this because I think he's just too talented. Like it's going to be a little bit harder because it's easier to always side with the players who, not only have a direct path, but like maybe have already had a little bit more of a taste of the big leagues, but didn't quite exceed rookie status, but also have guaranteed everyday reps right away, and you can look at like Evan Carter as someone that, will have that opportunity. But again, like Caminero could start a month late, and I don't think it necessarily matters if he plays to his ability, which is, being able to drive the ball the way that he does and hit the ball as hard as he does. So I think for me, he's a top 3 favorite. He should be a top 3 favorite for AL Rookie of the Year. And just the upside is just too immense to not have him as one of the top candidates.
Well, Junior gets a lot of love. So let's move on to the guys that might not be getting a lot of love. Looking at this farm system, are there guys that you see not getting enough hype, but everything that you see is like, well, why aren't they? Like, why is everybody not looking at it the right way?
So it's funny. I think last time you guys asked me that last time I was on here, and I went on and on and on about Xavier Isaac. And I'm so happy. I can't answer that anymore, which is great because everyone is on the Xavier Isaac train, which is awesome because I think he's incredibly talented. I'll go like better, like more known player, and then I'll go deeper cut because there is one deeper cut name that I don't get why he gets ignored. But we haven't seen him play much at this point, so I get it. But Colton Ledbetter, just kind of circling back to the original point, I had him as a potential comp A pick. Like I thought he would be a guy that could be picked in the 30 to 35 range. I just such a well-rounded player, good athlete who I was just surprised to see him fall there. And then now I think you look at some of the prospect rankings, some of the lists, he just is a little bit forgotten. I think he's closer to Braden Taylor than, people may think. And I think there's a very real scenario where Ledbetter could end up being the better player than Braden Taylor. When you look at 6'2" outfielder who can, I think is sneakier speed-wise than people give him credit for, above average field to hit. I think at least has average power potential, a good approach, just a gamer, just a really savvy game, and has a chance to stick in center. So I look at his game across the board, and I really like how well-rounded it is. He may never be an all-star, but I like his chances of being an above-average regular. And yeah, if people start to come around and believe he's an above-average regular, like a lot of top 100 players are top 100 prospects are guys that, their 75th percentile outcome is an above-average regular. So I think Ledbetter's well-rounded game, high floor, is kind of ignored, and there's still enough upside there. He's hit at every single stop that he's had so far.
Yeah, and he handled the transition from Samford to Mississippi State, which is quite a drastic change in that league and going to the SEC. And then you mentioned a deep cut as well, besides Ledbetter.
Ronnie Simon. I know he was left unprotected in the Rule 5, and he's a unique player because he's been traded for big leaguers twice now, Andrew Chafin, Jordan Luplow. But Ronnie, first of all, if you look at his numbers in the Winter League this year, crazy.
Yes.
But
he was a betting champ, wasn't he?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I've always liked this guy because I saw him in person the first time in Arizona Fall League a couple years ago. And it was a frantic game, right? Where like he's very raw, very aggressive, kind of plays like his hair is on fire for better and for worse. And he's kind of reined it in a little bit more over the last couple years. I thought last year, even more so, made some big strides in terms of his approach, in terms of just being a more well-rounded ball player. He's a switch hitter. He's an above-average runner. I don't think people realize for how compact he is, how hard this guy hits the ball. It's not like he's 25. He's 23. He'll be probably 24 right when the season starts. And once he got up to AAA last year, he got a lot more comfortable. The numbers started to look a lot better. He hit a 107 WRC plus in 32 games there. But the biggest thing for me was everyone was talking about how aggressive he is. Is that going to do him in? He cuts down on the chase. The walk rate jumps to the highest of his career, right around like 12% last year, 11 and change. 13 home runs, 31 stolen bases, a switch hitter. Like he's stretched a little bit thin at short, but can plug in there, can play second. I think you could throw him in left. He started to play a little bit of left, I think, in the Winter League. He's kind of this fun, super utility type that is a switch hitter who packs more of a punch than people give him credit for. And is just a well-rounded player. I was surprised that he was left off the 40, then even more surprised that he wasn't selected in the Rule 5. Like you got guys like, I love him, but Nasim Nunez being taken, I would take Ronnie Simon over him. So I just think he's very slept on. I have an average power grade on him. I have above average run. I have average field tool and a fringy to almost average hit tool. Like that's a solid bench utility piece at the big league level. And I'm seeing him left off of top 30 lists.
So obviously there's a shortstop situation in Tampa Bay that everybody knows about. There's going to be some competition in spring training. And we've talked about this so many times. You got Caballero, you've got possibly a Mead option. You've got Basabe, you've got Rosario now.
They signed Rosario, yeah.
So all of these, like you said, a spot start for a Junior Caminero, for example. Is there an option that we have been missing Ronnie Simon into the conversation, and with a spring training coming up that he performs well, could he get into that conversation?
I think he'd have to really, really perform. And the fact that they left him off of the 40 was a little surprising to me, but he did get, a non-roster invite to spring training, to big league spring training. I think because of the defense being a little bit more limited at shortstop, I think they'd probably prefer him in that like super utility role rather than being able to play it every day. Because if you're going to have someone that's like, I feel like if you're not going to have Rosario or Caballero or some of those other guys there, you probably want someone that can really pick it at short. And he's not a guy that's going to like really stand out there that way. But I look at like moving from Vidal Brujan, like, I think Ronnie Simon can do all the things that they were hoping Vidal Brujan could do. Not in the beginning, like what I'm saying more recently, just hoping, hopefully Brujan could at least be like a utility piece. And then he wasn't even that. Right. I think Simon can be like the second gasp of what people were hoping from Vidal Brujan and be that utility piece for them. and be able to play, all over the diamond and just give them some important depth, especially with Taylor Walls out and some of these other infielders just being so banged up.
Before we continue, I have to tell you this. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with winning $5 bet. That's $150 buckaroos if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with what they have, quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. So just go ahead and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, LOCKEDON. I'll repeat it one more time for you. FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot today. FanDuel, they are the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We talked a lot about Junior Caminero and others. We didn't touch too much on the number 2 and number 3 prospects in your rankings, Carson Williams and Curtis Mead, respectively. And Carson Williams, more of the defense first, Mead, more of the bat first. When it's all said and done, who do you think will ultimately have the better career when we look back 15, 20 years from now?
That is such a good question because they couldn't be more different,
Yeah.
right? Like, if it all clicks for Carson Williams, he is an all-star shortstop. If it all clicks for Curtis Mead, he's a very offensive-oriented infielder, right? And I know he's made some improvements with the arm strength this offseason, just continue to try to hone in on that. But that's a tough one because Mead is another guy that I think you could answer. Like, people forget that he was banged up last year. He still put up good numbers. And yeah, the big league debut wasn't unbelievably great, but it rarely is for a lot of guys. He really can swing it, and I'm still very, very bullish on him. But I'll go with, though there's more risk here, like Mead's floor is way higher, I'll go with the guy that plays elite defense at a premium position and can run into 25 to 30 home runs. Like, Carson Williams is the kind of guy that could hit 220 and still give you 4-5 WAR. Like, that's how good the defense and the power, mix in some stolen bases. Like, he's one of the best defensive shortstops in the minors. He hits the crap out of the ball, and he's very raw. Like, he's a surfer kid that, from the West Coast that didn't take baseball all that seriously until he realized, oh wow, I could be a first round pick. And I was reading a whole thing about how he didn't even really know that many players when he first was coming up, and now has become a junkie with the game. It was on FanGraphs. He did a phenomenal job talking with some of the Rays brass, but I think he's a guy that's still kind of learning the nuances of the game. And I think when you look at it from that lens, if the hit tool can even just be a little bit better, he could end up being a monster.
You're giving me shades of Willie Adames, a shortstop that can pick it, but has a lot of pop. That's giving me Adames vibes. So it's 2024.
Hopefully he can hit at the Trop, though. Hopefully Carson Williams doesn't have some sort of eye issue or excuse, whatever it may be, that prevented him from hitting at home, but mashing on the road.
That's true. That's true. So it's 2024. We're all getting older. Are there guys in this race system where they look at 2020, where you look at 2024 and you're like, if it doesn't click this year, I think it's a no-go?
That's a good question. There's a few guys that haven't even been around that long, but I do feel like I'll start to get pretty skeptical after this year. If not already, I'm probably already pretty skeptical. Brock Jones is a guy that just the tools are fun. Dude played safety at Stanford. He's a freak, but I was really disappointed with the pro debut. A lot of just the live looks I got didn't look great. The underlying ball data didn't look great. I think it's almost like a start from scratch, overhaul the swing, and just see what happens type of situation. So if it's not happening for Brock Jones this year, it's probably fair to wonder if it's ever going to happen because of how bad it looked last year. I mean, this was a college bat that just totally looked overmatched at the lower level. So that's a big concern. I love Greg Jones.
I knew you were going to mention. You mentioned a Jones. I was like, wait, Brock Jones, not Greg Jones. But now I see it.
Both Joneses. I love Greg Jones. He's so talented. He's such a cool dude. He's easy to root for. But when's it going to happen here? Right? He's going to be 26. I think he'll be 26 on opening day. He's got a hit, man. Like he flies, he can run into some baseballs, but I mean, we got to see a little bit more. I'm starting to get nervous. And it's the same thing with Cam Meisner. Like, are you going to hit enough? And I'm starting to worry that the answer is no.
Yeah, he can be a great lefty platoon guy. You know, he matches righties, but against lefties, it's like, ooh, you don't want to see that up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I get the feeling Greg Jones is like Steve Buscemi. How do you do, fellow kids? Like he's getting to that point of meme comparison there, where he's like 26 and he's still, bouncing around AAA. So that aside, we have talked a lot about prospects, in particular hitting prospects. So Aram, I want to give you the runway to spotlight or highlight a Rays pitching prospect that we should be honing in on and focusing more on over the next year plus.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked because there are some still really intriguing arms. I know everyone's wanted to talk about Mason Montgomery, and I think he had a decent year overall. But just looking at guys that have like more upside and could really make a big impact over the next year or two. In terms of stuff, I don't think you're going to find a guy in the system with better stuff than Yaniel Curet. It's Curet. I would hope so. I don't. Sometimes
it's Curet, right? Curet.
Yeah.
I mean, if it would be in Spanish, it would be Curet. But
yeah. But I didn't know if some guys just like for myself with my name like Aram. People call me Aram, and I just say okay. Like if I was a professional athlete, I just like let people Americanize it and just go with the flow. So I don't know. Like I don't know what he goes by. I haven't listened to enough broadcasts. Usually I watch all the starts like with the sound off, but he has ridiculous stuff. Like signed for $150,000 in 2019. His fastball is a plus fastball. His slider is a plus slider, and he's even flashing above average changeup. So you're like, okay, well, you just told me he has 3 quality pitches and 2+ pitches. Like, why is he not in the top 10? The command's probably like a 25 right now or 30 on a lot of hitters last year. But he also struck out 33% of batters. He also held opponents to a 149 batting average. He sits 97 with good shape. There's a really good chance that he's a high leverage reliever at the very worst. But if the command can get even anywhere near average or even slightly below average, I think this guy could be a frustrating 5-and-dive starter, but that ends up just being disgusting enough to be a quality arm. And that's a guy that, just not being on a lot of radars is pretty nasty. You don't find stuff like that outside of a top 10 in a system very often. And I think he could be a special arm. Santiago Suarez is kind of the opposite, but fills up the zone. Being so advanced for a teenager, spotting 3 pitches for a strike is definitely something that you don't find often. But one other name is Andrew Lindsay. He was acquired in that swap with the Marlins of Vidal Brujan and Calvin Fauché going over, and Lindsay coming back with another piece or two. And I think it's a really unique. I understand why the Rays took him, right? They love to target guys who throw weird or have really unique shape to their stuff. Lindsay has a unique story in itself where he called it quits after junior college and then went back and decided to pitch again and ended up at Tennessee. And then the stuff was insane there. Ended up being right there with Chase Dolander as, their weekend, one of their weekend arms, and was a 5th-round pick. And I think you look at the release, it's super unique. The fastball has ridiculous run to it, like 18, 20 inches sometimes a run. Hitters look extremely uncomfortable. Slider working off of that. I think he's a high probability big league reliever, but they may even try to keep him as a starter. Definitely deserves a little bit more shine.
Cool.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff as always, Aram, and we're going to be happy to be joined by you on Friday's episode as well. In addition to the Tampa Bay Rays top 15 prospects for 2024 on Just Baseball, what else do you want to plug? What else do you want to promote on the site, on social media, on podcasts? The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So, of course, putting out all the top prospect lists on justbaseball.com. Really excited about, our coverage that we have just in terms of our whole MLB staff going into the season. But on the Call Up, our prospect podcast, we recently just broke down the entire farm system. So if you want to check out that Rays farm system breakdown, check out the Call Up. Also interviewing a lot of players, we'll be keeping you briefed on the minor leagues all season long there. And then, of course, our flagship podcast is the Just Baseball Show, joined by Walker Bueller every Monday. And that's 5 days a week as well. But I appreciate that.